From Newzroom Afrika studios in Johannesburg, welcome to this month's second edition of This Week in Politics. My name is Vuyo Mvoko. Thank you for joining us. On the show this week,
the NA vote is inconsistent with the Constitution and invalid.
Impeachment back on the cards for President Cyril Ramaphosa as the Constitutional Court sets aside Parliament's decision on Palapala. What does it all mean, though? Where to now for the head of state and his party?
Where the minister took no accountability for any of the scandals that she has just presented on. It's never her fault. It seems to be everybody else's fault.
Social Development Minister and ANC Women's League President Tulashe leaves parliamentarians with more questions than answers.
Yes, there could be an issue in terms of what you refer to availability of cash, how many days should we have money. Perhaps there might be some issue there, but generally we are healthy.
South Africa's largest but broke municipality is in a pickle. It has to find billions it illegally agreed to pay workers and for which it simply has no budget. All that and more in today's episode of This Week in Politics, which starts right now. Possible impeachment is back on the table for President Cyril Ramaphosa as the Constitutional Court has ordered that the Section 89 independent panel report be sent to the impeachment committee. The report found that the president had a prima facie case to answer over the robbery of over $500,000 and alleged cover-up on his Palapala farm in Limpopo in 2020. The court found that the rule of the National Assembly that could prevent further investigations into the head of state's conduct was unconstitutional and set it aside. Newzroom Afrika's Tulashe unpacks the judgment.
It was on the 30th anniversary of the Constitution that the three arms of state would collide. In a three-way judgment, which was delayed by over 500 days, the country's highest court has reminded Parliament of its constitutional obligation to hold the executive accountable.
Rule 129I permits the National Assembly to terminate the impeachment process at a preliminary stage before a full inquiry can be conducted into whether a ground listed in Section 89, subsection 1 exists. This has the effect of foreclosing full engagement with the merits of the motion, stifling informed debate and undermining the values of accountability and transparency that must inform the National Assembly's processes. It is not sufficient for the National Assembly to proceed directly from receipt of an independent panel report to a vote and thereby suppress an impeachment motion that discloses prima facie the existence of a ground under Section 89, subsection 1.
Because of this, the Apex Court declared the rule unconstitutional, invalid, and consequently set it aside.
That's an important finding because it shows that in the process that Parliament actually adopted with the Palapala report, actually it basically negated the ability for the issues to be ventilated and actually scrutinized at the level that they should have been once the independent panel made its finding.
But the implication of the invalidation of the rule is that the process undertaken in which the rule was the guiding authority suffers the same fate.
It means only that the process through which that authority is exercised must be sufficiently open to allow for meaningful public scrutiny of the issues and the decision. The third judgment concludes that Rule 129I is unconstitutional and must be set aside. It further holds that the National Assembly's vote must likewise be set aside because it was taken under an invalid rule that prevented the National Assembly from properly determining whether a ground for impeachment existed.
Honourable Speaker. And now all roads lead back to where the process was initiated, the National Legislature.
That means that the Speaker now has to schedule or include the impeachment process in the parliamentary schedule, because the rule says that an impeachment motion is urgent, and that means it must take priority in the parliamentary program. So next week, Thursday, the Programming Committee of Parliament meets, and perhaps this is something that they will discuss as to when are we convening, when are we putting together the Section 89 committee, and the Section 89 committee must be representative of the political parties in Parliament. So it must be proportional, just like the head of committee, just like the Section 194 committee in the past. And then that committee that will continue with the process, getting evidence leaders, getting the president to come in and testify. So it's a whole inquiry that follows.
The work that began 4 years ago with the Section 89 independent panel, which included a prima facie finding of impropriety on the part of the president, has been resuscitated. It's now up to the impeachment committee to fully investigate the conduct of the president. Only after that process will there be a vote by the National Assembly on the findings of the committee. It's a judgment that firmly places the responsibility for executive accountability back where the Constitution intended, in the hands of lawmakers, as sought by the EFF in its application. And for the Red Berets, the legal maxim, the wheels of justice grind slowly, but grind exceedingly fine, may ring true. For Newzroom Afrika on Channel 405, I'm Tulashe at the Constitutional Court in Johannesburg.
President Cyril Ramaphosa's office says he respects the court's decision.
The presidency has noted the judgment of the Constitutional Court in the case brought by the economic freedom fighters, challenging the National Assembly's decision with respect to Section 89 proceedings against the president. President Ramaphosa respects the Constitutional Court's judgment and reaffirms his commitment to the Constitution, the independence of the judiciary, and the rule of law. President Ramaphosa has been consistent in providing his full assistance to the various inquiries into this matter. President Ramaphosa maintains that no person is above the law and that any allegation should be subjected to due process without fear, favor, or prejudice. The President calls on all South Africans to respect the court's judgment and all judicial institutions.
Those who had to wait more than 18 months for the judgment say the president must now do the right thing. Step aside.
Once we conclude that you have undermined your oath of office, you have committed crime, then we go to Parliament to impeach you. There is no impeach. We take away the salary. Because remember, President is paid for the rest of his life. So we remove you from the office, we take away the salary and all the benefits, including the blue lines. So the daughter Ganalena Ramaphosa, what takes the rank? So Utoya Villa takes the rank. Because even the status of a former president is taken away. He's no longer a former president. He's just Madlanga Cyril Ramaphosa. He becomes an ordinary man. Then criminal investigation comes in. Cyril is going to go to prison. The same way Zuma went to prison. He's going to go to prison. Mark my way. I always tell you these things and they come to happen. So I'm telling you now, like I told you before, Palapala will never die. I'm telling you now, Ramaphosa is going to jail. There is no way Ramaphosa will not go to jail. Once the impeachment process opens up, the kind of shenanigans that are going to come out of that process, the amount of evidence that is going to come out of that impeachment process, there is no way Ramaphosa will not be arrested.
I think it is a matter of life and death for our democracy, because the democratic project which we started in 1994 rests on the ability of the institutions to play their role, because we live in a constitutional democracy. In a constitutional democracy, the constitution reigns supreme, and because the constitution reigns supreme, in the event that the judicial, the executive or parliament fails in its constitutional obligations, it becomes paramount that the constitutional order, the constitutional court must restore order.
President Ramaphosa's party, the ANC, wants him to stay put.
My response to the judgment is that the Court has made a very important finding that has got to be respected, not less by the African National Congress, who have always been at the center of pursuing the kind of judiciary that we have in South Africa. So we have no reason to actually doubt the findings of the court. Our job now is to go and have a conversation as a collective in the ANC, together with our parliamentary caucus. We do believe that our parliamentary caucus took good judgment in as far as that is concerned, but the court has made a finding, and we've got to respect that and make sure that we do and make amends as the African National Congress.
Other political parties also weighed in.
When this matter goes to Parliament, Action SA is going to work with parties in the opposition on this issue. We've been very involved in the Palapala matters from the IPID investigation side as well. And we're going to call upon parties in the GNU that they need to find their principles once again.
The Democratic Alliance remains a party of ethics, clean governance, and constitutionalism. That has not changed. And so no one, and absolutely no one, should expect the DA to shield any form of wrongdoing, even if that wrongdoing is done by the President of the Republic of South Africa.
We are going to ensure, because obviously with the institution of the impeachment committee, ensure that we drive the agenda that the President must be impeached.
Let's look back at how Ramaphosa has, until now, managed to survive the political onslaught that followed the Palapala revelations. It's almost 4 years to the day when the country's former spy chief, Arthur Fraser, introduced South Africa to a Limpopo farm that most people never knew even existed. 2 years earlier, Palapala, a 4,500-hectare farm specializing in breeding rare game and owned by the country's president, had been the scene of an unreported crime. Fraser alleged that more than $4 million in cash had been stolen from the president's property, where it had curiously been stuffed in couches. While Ramaphosa later disputed the amount, saying it was much less, questions remained. Among them, what was so much cash doing in his house and kept in such suspicious circumstances? Was the head of state also a money launderer? Opposition MPs wanted to know.
I deny that there was any form of money laundering. I have said, and I've said it more publicly, that it was proceeds of sale of game.
John Steenhuisen, the leader of the then official opposition, the DA, would ask the South African Reserve Bank, the Financial Intelligence Center, and the FBI to investigate whether the foreign exchange held by Ramaphosa was the result of an illicit flow of funds and whether money laundering was involved. UDM leader Abantu Olomisa wrote to the National Assembly calling for an investigation and for Ramaphosa to step down. EFF leader Julius Malema, after his party released a video of the robbery, also called on the president to step aside.
Once the president avoids accountability and once the president is not held accountable by a parliament or any other statement, then everyone else below him will know that you can do whatever you want away with it. And that's exactly what we are trying to avoid.
ATM leader Vuyo Mvoko, who had asked then Public Protector Vuyo Mvoko to investigate, ultimately got Parliament to establish the Section 89 inquiry that was led by former Chief Justice Sandile Ngcobo. Justice Ngcobo and his panel found that the president had a prima facie case to answer.
My accountability to Parliament will obviously fully culminate in the structure of the Section 89 committee that you, as members of the National Assembly, have set up, and that is where my full cooperation will also be displayed.
When MPs debated the inquiry report on December 13, 2022, though, not even the handful of ANC MPs who had voted with the opposition could help get Ramaphosa impeached. The ANC had more than enough numbers. Days after that vote, Ramaphosa would be re-elected ANC president, while some of his then detractors within the party now find themselves leading new political parties. For Newzroom Afrika on Channel 405, I am Vuyo Mvoko. Welcome back. You're watching This Week in Politics. Controversial Social Development Minister Tulashe faced parliamentarians this week to answer a whole range of questions, among them how a helper who was supposed to be employed at one of her official residences in either Cape Town or Pretoria ended up at her private home in the Eastern Cape. And it did not end there. It's alleged that the minister's daughter took half of the helper's salary.
Chair, Ms. Nomathamsanqa Khuhlane was employed as a temporary food service aider under Regulation 57(2) of the Public Service Amendment Regulation. Chair, on this salary that was split in two, I can categorically state that Ms. Khuhlane was employed by the department in the official residence in Cape Town. When it comes to the payments to the daughter, Chair, I have no knowledge of that because Ms. Nomathamsanqa's salary came straight from department to her bank account. Ms. Nomathamsanqa, Chair, got ill when she was appointed, and you got to realize that I was reported that she's unable to stay in Cape Town because of her state of health. She was then told that she had to be in Eastern Cape. It is when she was in the Eastern Cape, stayed with the daughter, that between the two of them, they had their own arrangement, which I was not aware of. I am still not aware of.
The minister's children have apparently also been using 2 cars she accepted from a Chinese manufacturer worth about R1 million, which she reportedly said were donations to the ANC Women's League that she leads. One of the cars had reportedly been sold by the time reports surfaced.
Chair, you would also know, members would be aware of the issues of the 2 vehicles that were donated. The matter, Chair, came before us as a parliamentary question. This parliamentary question, Chair, was sent by one of our honorable members. As per the norm, I responded to the parliamentary question, and Chair, in that question, I made it very clear that the cars were meant for the ANC Women's League, not me. And this is why I did not declare them. I guess there's a perception that I misled Parliament. However, I want to reinstate that I did not mislead Parliament. The matter now, Chair, has been deposited to the Ethics Committee, which I have deposited my own affidavit to the Ethics Committee. The matter is now at that point, which I will request that we leave it there until it has been concluded at that point.
The Chinese cars and the helper were, of course, not the only scandals the minister was asked about. She had previously been accused of giving her Director General a 5 instead of a 1-year contract, and of employing an unqualified 22-year-old niece of her special advisor as her chief of staff. The special advisor as well stands accused of illegally drawing 2 salaries, with Tulashe allegedly protecting him.
So, Chair, this appointment of the DG for a year was a little bit concerning. Hence, I had to went and personally brief the DG to say, we have this outcome from the cabinet, you got 1 year. Chair, going forward, as I have just narrated that the question came from the honorable member, just respond a year, again the question came, responded a year again, then the question came for the 3rd time that I am misleading Parliament. I needed now to go back and relook at the actual question, because from where I was seated at the time, I was part of the cabinet that took a decision. I personally briefed the DG because I needed to, because the cabinet was going to pronounce itself, but it was a little bit more human for me to talk to DG closely. So the question came once, came twice, 3rd time, I then had to look at the question. I called for the actual contract. It's when I put my eyes on the contract that the contract was then suggesting that DG was given a 5-year contract. That took me by the biggest surprise, because, Chair, it was a huge concern. I then called upon the then acting DDG to assist me and take the matter for forensic investigation, because my signature was talking against the cabinet's decision. I wrote formally to the Minister Buthelezi, asking him about this. We spoke closely. He said, it's an error. I then said, because it's your error, so take responsibility. Indeed, Minister Buthelezi took responsibility.
Not all committee members bought the minister's stories.
Your daughter takes half the aid's salary to buy groceries. This is your daughter, right? Your daughter is driving the ANC Women's League's vehicles because it is registered in your daughter's name, right? Your daughter also goes and sells the vehicles of the ANC Women's League. So your daughter is busy with a lot of things. I'm not sure when you declared and when you responded to my question, when you said that because it shows, the record shows, I'm just not sure, I asked the team to go and print it, that both those vehicles were registered in your children's names. So this means your son is also part of the ANC Women's League.
It does point that perhaps you are not fit to hold office of Minister of the Social Development Department. If you are constantly being misled by everybody around you, it raises serious concerns of your effectiveness as the Minister of Social Development. Now, Chairperson, the Minister then speaks about On slide 15 of the presentation, the last point, the minister says, for that matter, I never instituted any disciplinary processes on the former DG. And I would like to say that this is a misrepresentation of what actually happened. The Daily Maverick printed or spoke to a letter from the president that was directed to you, Minister, on the 12th of March, where he speaks specifically about the fact that it is in the president's purview to institute disciplinary action amongst DGs or suspending or even advertisement and appointment of the DGs. And in this letter, he speaks specifically around it. So surely you would have known about this. Also on the 14th of October, the Department of Social Development wrote to the DG, letting him know that there will be disciplinary proceedings happening towards him. So with this evidence, Chairperson, I put it to you that the minister has misrepresented in this portfolio committee and that she's not being categorically factual with the truth. The minister took no accountability for any of the scandals that she has just presented on. It's never her fault. It seems to be everybody else's fault, which is very concerning for me because in the beginning of her presentation, the minister speaks about the need to be out for accountability and transparency, but yet that is not currently happening in this portfolio committee.
According to the President's office, Tulashe's boss is seized with all the matters and is attending to them.
With respect to Minister Tulashe, the President is attending to the matter. The Minister has delivered her report to the President, articulating her side of the story with respect to the vehicles and other issues. As you know, the President prefers to take his time when he's dealing with such matters, and so he will not be under any form of pressure to arrive at whatever decision he may arrive at. But it's a matter that he's on top of, and he's aware of all the issues. And without speculating, I'm sure in the next couple of weeks or so, he will be meeting with the minister.
I suppose many people will ask, well, with the Constitutional Court decision on Palapala, will the President have time to focus on such issues as the ones involving Social Development Minister CCC Tulashe? After the break, we'll talk local government. Hi, Zugiswa. Hi, Zugiswa.
Hello.
It's Vuyo.
Hi, Vuyo. How are you?
Well, thanks, and how are you?
Well, thank you. Good to hear from you.
Cool, cool. We'll be with you shortly.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Welcome back. You're watching This Week in Politics with me, Vuyo Mvoko. The city of Johannesburg, South Africa's largest but broke municipality, is in a race against time to find billions it agreed to pay workers, but for which it has no budget. On Friday morning, Joburg Mayor Dada Morero held an emergency meeting with Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana following a scathing letter Treasury wrote to the city. In the letter, Godongwana took issue with the Metro's deteriorating finances, its inability to pay creditors, as well as its poor reporting record. The minister went further, threatening to withhold the city's funding unless Morero scrapped what Treasury deemed to be an illegal 10 billion rand salary agreement entered into by the Metro and the SA Municipal Workers Union. Speaking ahead of their meeting, Morero defended the wage deal and denied that the city was bankrupt.
By 2025, the city had already taken a report to council to move the employees to level 10. So that agreement has been done. The issue that we may want to debate is at what point are you faced with challenges on finances? But the reality is that this agreement has to be implemented. And unfortunately or fortunately, I found myself at the seat at the point of implementing this decision. It's a decision that we must implement. And there's no two ways about it. We must find the resources and pay the workers what is due to them. It has nothing to do with the G20. It started in 2016. We have to implement. Well, the city is not bankrupt. We're still able to pay all our commitments on a month-to-month basis. We're still paying our salaries. We're still paying our suppliers. We're still paying our loans that we've borrowed. So we are not a bankrupt city. We can account that our bank account is still fine. We're still managing. Yes, there could be an issue in terms of what you refer to availability of cash. How many days should we have money? Perhaps there might be some issue there, but generally we are healthy.
The South African Municipal Workers Union is adamant the negotiated wage deal will have to be honored or else.
What we can promise you is that we have subsidized the city of Johannesburg for far too long. In fact, it's from 1995. So the next step from SAM is to go back and mobilize its workforce, its members, and the service delivery that unfortunately is trying to promise the residents of Johannesburg, it cannot be rendered by people that are not being paid correctly. So definitely we will do all we can to ensure that we no longer subsidize the city of Johannesburg, because the attitude is that what you have given them the left cheek, they think we can give them the right cheek. So definitely they will get what they are cooking.
Now, as pressure mounts for Ekurhuleni City Manager Kagiso Lerutla to be suspended, Mayor Nkosindipile Xhakaza insists such a move would be premature. This is now talking about Ekurhuleni. Lerutla is currently on paid leave following his arrest in mid-April. He faces charges of fraud, corruption, and defeating the ends of justice. The allegations center on an alleged identity switch scheme. Lerutla and suspended Deputy EMPD Chief Julius Mkhwanazi are accused of paying an impersonator 400,000 rands to appear in court on Lerutla's behalf for a speeding charge while he attended a job interview.
In the interest of council in the main, and let's uphold at all times the available prescription. The city manager is not on suspension. We have not arrived at that decision. No, we have not arrived. No, you see, I'm saying, even if you want to arrive at that point, you have to have an item, but for us to activate that item, it has to be this council that says go ahead and do it. It has been happening like that. And now, yes, that's what needs to happen.
Lobby group, the Independent Citizens Movement, says suspending Lerutla would be in the interests best interest, one should say, of the metro's stability?
Bring instability? The answer is yes. Will it threaten the witnesses? As a senior official, the answer is yes. So I don't know how you're going to run away from precautionary suspension. Because precautionary suspension is not a punitive measure. Alderman Berg is correct. We have suspended people previously for lesser offenses. So I don't know how council wants to jeopardize itself outside of its responsibility in terms of the regulation. So I do support the call that there has to be precautionary suspension.
Zugiswa Kota is from Imali Yetu Coalition for Open Budget, a coalition of several civil society organizations that advocate for good governance, public participation, and accountable use of public funds. She joins me now for a discussion. Zugiswa, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Let's start with what happened this week around the city of Johannesburg. Certainly at face value and from where a lot of people sit, the finance minister is cracking the whip, deservedly so. I don't know what your thoughts are around that letter that the finance minister wrote to the mayor of the city of Johannesburg.
Hi, Vuyo, and thanks for this chance to weigh in. Absolutely. I think that it is important that the National Treasury and the Minister of Finance in particular sort of take very strong stances on governance failures, quite frankly, given what we've seen in years, many years to date, and even preceding Minister Godongwana and many ministers beyond that. So I think for us, certainly, when we speak about accountability, the layers between the executive, the parliamentary and legislative arm of government and otherwise are very important, and it is important for them to work together, but by that same token for them to call each other to account when necessary, because that level of remove is precisely what the Constitution envisions. So encouraging.
Well, I mean, Treasury, well, in that letter, the minister suggests that the city has actually acted irresponsibly because they knew that they didn't have the budget for the wage agreement that they signed with SAMU. They go further to say that agreement is actually illegal. But on the other hand, you, of course, have a union that says there's a central bargaining council. We sat down and the officials we negotiated with had the mandate to actually negotiate. So they would have had their facts on their fingertips. We can be held as unions or as workers. We can be held responsible for what those officials did, knowing fully well what the financial state of affairs of the municipality is. And they go further to say, as workers, they have been subsidizing the city of Johannesburg for many, many years, and they can no longer afford to do so. Do they have a point?
Yeah, I think the point you ended off on, which is about the municipal officials, the custodians of municipal budgets, those who are entrusted to fulfill the mandates or the obligations or the provisions of the Municipal Finance Management Act, for instance, and other legislative requirements. That is who is in charge. Secondly, accounting officers, as the name states, must account. And so I think what the last bit of your point is precisely that it cannot be that workers suffer as a result of accounting officers to fail, or accounting officers failing to fulfill their obligations in the context of municipal legislation. And I think that's the fundamental point here. So while it may also be it's a complicated context, I don't want to point it as or outline it as one that is simple or as one that facile and simple. But I think fundamentally what is missing here are clear and strong governance structures, accountability structures in which those who are responsible for overseeing municipal budgets, for receiving and accounting for not only that, but also actually, quite frankly, planning accordingly. It's clear that it's not even just a question of our metropolitan context. It's actually a context across the nation in which accounting officers are not doing what they're supposed to do.
Of course, I mean, in his letter, the finance minister raised the issue of the MFMA, the Municipal Finance Management Act,
yes,
and what it prescribes. But then the unions, on the other hand, say it's not fair. It's actually wrong. They're suggesting to just talk about the MFMA because there's also the Labor Relations Act, which provides for bargaining and which you cannot undermine those processes either.
I mean, yeah, we are from the perspective of someone who isn't a labor lawyer. I'm not a labor lawyer. That isn't a question that I'm in a position to answer with any level of authority. However, I think fundamental to this question is again, like the issue of governance and municipal finance expenditure, or like management. From the perspective of, so our coalition, for instance, has worked relatively closely or, collaborated with the National Treasury in many respects, has collaborated in ways that have sought to not only open up public budgets, so to understand better what do provincial and national budgets look like, what is the budgeting system, what are the realities of that context, but also to understand, even in the municipal context, who are the role players, who are the stakeholders. And so in the question of, it does seem to me that what you're pitting and what is being pitted is labor to a degree against, the executive and however we frame it. But I do feel that in this instance, that's perhaps a fairly superficial dichotomy. And really the question comes back to the tried and tested and unfortunately unresolved issue of poor governance in the context of municipal finance, poor accountability, and I think that it perhaps is sometimes easier, to have labor, to have workers suffer, rather than to have politicians and high-ranking officials suffer, and have their fingers pointed at and have consequences meted out in terms of poor financial governance, poor planning, poor financial management. But my take at this point, and our take as a coalition, very often is that at this point where we are, the country isn't at a point where we can speak with authority that our legislation is trumping governance, that our legislation on paper is the same as what's in practice. And quite frankly, I think it is important to also account or to accept the fact that you cannot create, you cannot sort of, there isn't a safeguard for poor leadership and poor consequence management, no matter how amazing and how progressive your legislation is. And that's precisely where we're at right now. And I think at the municipal level, as we work towards the elections, those are the fundamental questions. Is what does weak leadership, what does patronage look like? What are the weaknesses in terms of, and yes, I think I don't want to underplay the labor context without a doubt. But certainly it does seem that weak leadership, poor consequence management, and a disastrous accountability ecosystem, none of that, or rather all of that is, plays at the risk or at the expense of our legislative context, no matter how amazing our legislation is at the municipal level.
I want us to end this conversation on the other issue of the Ekurhuleni metropolitan municipality, especially on the back of what you say about lack of consequences, about poor leadership and the like. You had a sitting in Ekurhuleni where they started debating whether or not to suspend a person who is clearly a rogue municipal or city manager. And you had a mayor saying, no, we don't think that this person should face the consequences that are being suggested by other members of the council. And this is the same official only a month or two ago increased salaries of his peers and fellow executive in the municipality, and they had to backtrack on that. And on Friday, you had the same person, you had the mayor saying, this same person must be left as they are. And we know also what has come out of the Madlanga Commission about the same municipal manager. You ask yourself, what is going on in light of everything that we are seeing, we're hearing through your Madlanga commissions, through your ad hoc committees, but also through other cases that are in the courts?
Yeah. I mean, I suppose in to be as brief as possible, Vuyo, the fundamental point that highlights is that power of political incentives to bypass rules and legislation is something perhaps that we continue to underestimate in South Africa. And that's precisely what that points to. And precisely as you say, in the context of the Madlanga Commission, and even previously to that, what we heard in the context of the Zondo Commission, that's precisely it. Political incentives override legislation. And that is a fact as we stand. And perhaps, I'm always very keen to find bright lights or to kind of outline hope or areas of potential ability to address issues. And one of those is maybe in the legislative reform context, whether it's in the local government white paper and others, but professionalization of the local government context. But for sure, the political incentives are powerful, and they continue to be powerful.
That's where we're going to leave it. Let me thank you very much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. After the break, protest marches in several of the country's cities and some shuttle diplomacy between the Department of International Relations and various countries' ambassadors this week, all was coming on the back of marches and other protest actions we've seen against illegal immigrants in the country. We'll explore that story in a bit of detail in a moment. Don't go away. Prof, can you hear me? It's Vuyo.
Vuyo, can you hear me?
Yes, loudly and clearly, Prof. Protest marches in several of the country's cities this week together with some shuttle diplomacy between the Department of International Relations and various countries' ambassadors, all in a week's work over the past 7 days. While South Africa has seen sporadic anti-illegal immigration marches and flare-ups over the past couple of decades, they appear to be happening fairly frequently these days. What lies behind this phenomenon now? Well, to help us answer that question is Professor Andre Duvenach, who is based at the University of the Northwest's Potchefstroom campus. Prof, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Now, you have, together with your colleagues, of course, have looked at this phenomenon. Do we know what is certainly from where many people are sitting these days, behind this upsurge of these protest actions, confrontations, businesses being closed down, the government and state law enforcement agencies having to be involved? Do we know what exactly is happening? Has anyone been able, or have you or your colleagues been able to put a finger on it?
Good evening, Vuyo and the viewers. Maybe just before answering you in a more direct way, I think it is important to get some background. And the first point is that this is not a new phenomenon. This is a historical old phenomenon. We have seen xenophobic tendencies coming over the past decade, and there are certain economic reasons and other reasons for that specific phenomenon. But the fact of the matter is, at the moment, it seems to reach utmost high, to the extent that we have seen marches in many important cities throughout South Africa. And we need to try and answer, why is this the case? And my understanding is that although it is a phenomenon that is historically well established, the reason for the current energy in terms of xenophobic tendencies has to do with the 2026 local elections. I think there are political parties, and I'm referring to parties like the MK Party, Action South Africa, and even the ANC to a certain extent, that need to find an enemy in order to mobilize themselves. And the apartheid's narrative are not doing the thing anymore. Now it is important to define an opponent, and they are getting this opponent in terms of illegal immigrants. And just to give a statistical perspective on this, officially the total of illegal immigrants are something like 3.5 million, but unofficially people are stating the total as high as 5 million and even more. And to get perspective on that statistic, if we look at the Afrikaner, the white Afrikaner community in South Africa, it's about 2.6 million. So we are talking about a huge group of people making use of our social systems, our hospitals, our clinics, in some cases even the grant system, the social grants in South Africa. They are creating for jobs for themselves, or they are taking jobs away from South Africa, and the response are what we are seeing at the moment.
So is it not then, I mean, governance failures across the board, from allowing the borders to be porous, to not delivering, you know, your social services to South Africans, and that then puts us in the situation that we are in right now?
Yes, indeed, that is the case. We know that service delivery, generally speaking, in South Africa, on all levels, we can refer to the provision of water, electricity, but also medical services and other types of services, are a huge challenge currently in South Africa. And at the moment, the experience of many South Africans is that there are people from other countries using the capacity of South Africa at the expense of South Africans. And this is creating conflict, and in many cases we have seen this conflict escalating into patterns of violence. The other side of the coin is that there are strong reaction from other countries against the xenophobic tendencies in South Africa. I'm specifically referring to a country like Mozambique, Botswana, and definitely Nigeria. And you refer to the shuttle diplomacy, and it has specifically reference to these three countries, maybe even more, because what is happening here is going against the whole approach of a unity for Africa and the whole idea of Pan-Africanism, the African Renaissance, etc. In that sense, there's a huge conflict developing between South Africa and other countries in Southern Africa and outside of Southern Africa. And this is not a positive tendency for South Africa.
Prof, we have run out of time, unfortunately, but I have to ask you this, because at the end of the day, we have to deal with this situation, number one. And it's also important to underline the fact that there haven't really been deaths during these protests or people, seriously injured. What then becomes the role of people like you and me, people like you who are academics who are studying this, and the role of people like me who have to, disseminate news, seek opinions, and try and make sense of what exactly is going on and where it's leading us?
Yeah, you are quite right. There weren't very high levels of violence and people killed in the process. That is why my main argument in the beginning is that it is all about the organization and mobilization of support. We know that parties would like to rally support in order to perform well in the elections, in the upcoming local elections. And this is an issue identified by parties like the MK Party, like Action South Africa. And this provides them with the opportunity to organize and mobilize support. And I think that is the main reason in this regard.
Prof, let me thank you so much for your time and for your insights. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's how we come to the end of this week's episode of the Politics.